Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Authorities in the German state of Bavaria say that they are searching for the culprits behind a devastating museum heist this week, one that saw thieves make off with hundreds of valuable gold coins, which are estimated to be worth well over €1 million. According to reports, the incident began at around 10 a.m. on November 22nd, when staff at the Celtic and Roman Museum in the town of Manching arrived to work to find that they had been the victims of a break-in. The culprits had gotten in by prying open one of the building's doors, after which they had smashed a display case housing the museum's most valuable exhibit, a collection of 483 ancient Celtic gold coins, as well as a large chunk of gold from which some of the coins had been made. All of the gold and coins had been stolen. While the museum does have an alarm system, police say that the thieves were cleverly able to get around this by cutting cables at one of the town's telecommunications centers prior to the heist. This knocked out an estimated 1,300 internet connections in the local area, one of which was the museum's, thus sabotaging their alarm system. According to reports, though a technician still noticed that the alarm system was down and alerted police at around 4 a.m. that morning, by this time, authorities already had their hands full. They assumed that thieves were targeting the banks, not the museum, so their resources were focused elsewhere. Museum officials say that if sold to collectors, the stolen gold coins could fetch around €1.6 million, or around $1.7 million US. However, they fear that those responsible, who they suspect are members of an organized criminal group, will melt down the gold instead. While the gold would only be worth a fraction of its current value in this state, its illegal origins would obviously be much harder to trace. Officials say that this worst-case scenario would be a massive blow given the historical value of the coins. The coins were reportedly first found in 1999 during a dig at an ancient Celtic settlement and are believed to date back to the 1st century BCE. They are also considered to be the largest discovery of Celtic gold in the 20th century. At the time of this recording, authorities have not identified any suspects in this week's heists, other than to speculate that they could be involved in organized crime. Currently, they say that they are speaking with officials at other museums who experienced similar incidents in the past few years in order to see if the crimes might be linked. Authorities in northern France say that they are stunned and saddened by a horrific act of violence this week after 2 public servants were held captive and one of them was allegedly murdered by a business owner. According to reports, the incident began sometime on the afternoon of November 21st, when a 43-year-old tax inspector and his female colleague went to a farm property in Bullecourt, a small village of about 250 people located roughly 100 miles north of Paris. The civil servants were supposed to conduct a routine audit of a local businessman, an antiques dealer who collected items and then resold them at his home. However, neither of them returned. Later that evening, police were contacted by a witness who alerted them to a situation at the farm. They arrived to find a disturbing scene. The 43-year-old tax inspector was dead on the floor of a main residence on the property. He had reportedly been stabbed repeatedly. The female colleague, though physically unharmed, was found tied to a chair in the residence and in an understandable state of shock. After a short search, the 46-year-old antiques dealer was found dead in an outbuilding on the farm. Police say that he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. While authorities have not released any motive behind the tragic incident, they have stated that early evidence suggests that the crime could have been premeditated. Investigators allege that, among other things, metal clamps were found at the scene that had been recently purchased by the 46-year-old. These were apparently used in conjunction with rope to restrain the victims. Tax officials have also alleged that while inspectors are normally sent to conduct audits alone, in this case, the 43-year-old victim was accompanied by his female colleague because there had been tensions with the antique dealer during previous visits to his business. At the time of this recording, none of the names of those involved have been released, and the situation is still under investigation. Authorities in the Argentine capital of Buenos Aires say that they are searching for a violent fugitive this week after he allegedly shot and killed another man outside of his home following an earlier argument. According to reports, the incident began sometime in the early morning hours of November 20th when the victim, 21-year-old Ezequiel Dante Leyva, got into an argument with the suspect, identified only as Lorenzo, outside of a nightclub in the Buenos Aires suburb of Villa Salina. Witnesses allege that the confrontation did not appear to be that serious, and that though the two pushed each other, they never actually came to blows, and Leyva never even went inside of the club. However, all of that changed just hours later when Leyva had returned to his home in the suburb of Ingeniero Budge, a few miles away. It was just before 8 a.m., and the 21-year-old was sitting in his car listening to music with a female friend, when another vehicle came driving down the street. Without stopping, one of the vehicle's occupants leaned out of a window and began firing gunshots at Leyva's car. Though the female passenger was unharmed and immediately ran for help, Leyva was hit in the head. By the time he arrived at a local hospital, there was nothing anyone could do, and he was pronounced dead. Thanks to a nearby surveillance camera that captured the terrifying attack, as well as statements from the female survivor and others who had witnessed Leyva's earlier altercation, police quickly turned their attention towards Lorenzo. They reportedly found the car that had been used in the shooting abandoned about 5 miles away from the crime scene hours later. However, there was no sign of Lorenzo anywhere. While police are currently searching for the now wanted fugitive, it's said that in the meantime, some have tried to take justice into their own hands. According to reports, 2 of Leyva's friends are in custody after they allegedly went to Lorenzo's home on Sunday night and set the place on fire. As for what the nature of the dispute between Leyva and Lorenzo was in the first place, that remains unclear. However, it's alleged that this is not the first time that they had fought. The situation is still developing. Authorities in the Australian state of Victoria have issued a bombshell reversal in the case of a missing 38-year-old man this week, after insisting for more than 16 years that his disappearance was not suspicious. According to reports, 38-year-old Christopher Jarvis was last seen sometime after 6 a.m. on the morning of June 13, 2006, when he left the home that he shared with his partner and stepchildren in the town of Wangoom. Christopher was supposed to be headed to his job at a trucking company in the nearby city of Warrnambool. However, he never arrived. He was reported missing sometime after 7:30 that same morning after concerned colleagues called his family and informed them that he hadn't shown up for work. Less than an hour after Christopher's disappearance was reported, his abandoned silver 1991 Ford station wagon was found on fire in some dense vegetation at Thunder Point, a popular lookout in Warrnambool. Despite the mysterious and sudden nature of Christopher's disappearance, as well as his family's insistence that this was completely out of character for him, following an investigation, authorities reportedly concluded that the situation was not suspicious. Instead, according to his family, police told them that they believed he had taken his own life. This was allegedly the position of authorities until earlier this month, when the Australian news outlet ABC released a bombshell report indicating that police had reopened the case. That report was followed by another update in which it was confirmed that investigators had uncovered new information suggesting that Christopher Jarvis had actually been the victim of foul play. It also stated that 2 arrests had been made in the case. The suspects have now been identified as 59-year-old Glenn Ernest Fenwick and a 70-year-old former police officer named Stephen Frederick Johnson, both of whom have now been charged with murder. While authorities have so far provided no details about the information that supposedly led to the arrests or what evidence they might have against the two men, some reports we came across stated that Johnson had been the landlord of the property where Christopher lived with his partner and stepchildren at the time of his disappearance. Currently, police say that they are still searching for Christopher's remains and are asking for anyone who might have information about the case to come forward. Representatives from Japan's Tokyo Metropolitan Police say that a 27-year-old gig worker's next side hustle might be in a jailhouse cafeteria after he was arrested for allegedly smearing food on the door of a customer after becoming disgruntled while on the job. According to reports, it all started on October 12th when 27-year-old Takuma Ichikawa made a food delivery to an apartment building in Tokyo's Toshima ward while working as an Uber Eats courier. The order was completed, and apparently on Ichikawa's end, everything seemed fine, until a little later that day when he noticed something on his app. The customer at the Toshima apartment, identified only as a woman in her 20s, had given him a low rating. While reports don't mention why the woman wasn't satisfied with her order, so we can't speak to the validity of her problem, regardless, it's safe to say that people just being jerks sometimes is unfortunately a predictable hazard of this kind of job. Apparently, this was not the way that Ichikawa saw it though, and he decided he would make it known that he took the situation personally. According to police, after receiving the low rating, the 27-year-old returned to the woman's apartment at least 2 times and smeared curry all over her apartment door. They allegedly know this because Ichikawa was caught by surveillance cameras at the building entering the premises twice on October 12th and once on October 13th. It took police a little time to positively identify Ichikawa, but he was reportedly arrested on November 14th. So far, the 27-year-old has allegedly remained silent during questioning, and it's unclear what charges he could be facing. Whether police throw the book at Ichikawa or not, though, one commenter on a local news site summed up the situation this way: "It's definitely a lesson on how not to curry favor with your customers." Authorities in the Thai province of Nakhon Si Thammarat say that they are searching for an equally bumbling and disturbing criminal this week after he allegedly broke into the home of a terrified female resident and asked her for some money, as well as a roll in the hay. According to reports, the incident began at around 2 a.m. on November 21st, when a 29-year-old teacher named Sasatorn Datakru was awoken to strange sounds coming from her kitchen in Thung district. When she went to investigate, she was startled to see that an unknown man had entered through the back door of her home, which she had accidentally left unlocked that night before going to bed. Terrifyingly, before she could call for help, the man covered her mouth with one of his hands. The man promised Sasatorn that if she just stayed quiet, there was nothing to be worried about. After all, he said, he was just there to borrow 500 baht, the equivalent of about $14 US. I mean, what a relief, right? The strange man in your house in the middle of the night is just here for a temporary loan. To her immense credit, Sasatorn reportedly managed to remain calm, explaining that she didn't have cash on her, but that she could transfer the money from an app on her phone. Apparently not realizing that he was essentially handing over his banking information, the thief agreed to the transfer and the money was sent. That's when things allegedly got even stranger. In perhaps the greatest misreading of an interaction between two human beings ever, once the transaction was complete, the thief reportedly asked Sasatorn if she was interested in making love. After all, nothing sets the mood like an impromptu home invasion. Once again, amazingly, Sasatorn kept her cool and told the thief no and that he needed to leave, to which he agreed. Before going on his way, though, the man reportedly decided to share what he apparently thought were some final words of wisdom. He told Sasatorn not to forget to lock her door before going to sleep, and that living alone was dangerous. He also told her not to move to a different house, because he totally intended on paying back the 500 baht. Then, even though he had originally come in through the back door, he allegedly made the bizarre choice to climb out of Sasatorn's home through the bathroom ceiling. He apparently cut himself multiple times while doing this, leaving blood all over the bathroom. While police say that they so far have not been able to track down the unknown man, they're fairly certain that between the DNA evidence he left at the scene and his banking information, that they'll be able to identify him soon. The situation is still under investigation. Authorities in the central Chinese province of Henan say that dozens of people are dead this week after a devastating fire broke out at a factory. According to reports, the incident began sometime on the afternoon of November 21st, when the blaze erupted at the Kaishinda Trading Company, located in an area of Anyang known as the city's high-tech district. Though dozens of firefighters were sent to the scene along with an estimated 63 emergency vehicles, it allegedly took them until nearly midnight to fully extinguish the flames, between 7 and 8 hours after the fire was first reported. Sadly, at least 38 people have so far been confirmed dead, most of whom were women who worked at the factory. While the country's state media has apparently been light on details as to what happened, multiple reports claim that the fire was caused by sparks which ignited cotton cloth that was being stored at the facility. These sparks were allegedly caused by electrical welding, which was being done in violation of numerous safety protocols. Though it's said that multiple arrests have already been made in connection with the incident, details seem to differ between reports. Some state that one of the company's owners has been arrested, while others claim that as many as 4 people have been taken into custody, 2 of whom worked for Kaixing and 2 of whom worked for an unidentified clothing company. In either case, no details have been provided about what charges the suspect or suspects might be facing. According to reports, this week's tragedy is far from the only industrial disaster to plague China in recent memory. Just back in April of this year, a building collapse that also took place in Henan claimed the lives of 53 people, while an explosion at a chemical warehouse in the city of Tianjin in 2015 killed 173. In this last case, a number of local officials were reportedly accused of taking bribes to ignore safety violations, though it remains to be seen if something like that will happen in this week's case. People across the UK are in mourning this week after a mother and her 2 children were killed in what police have called a deliberate arson attack. According to reports, the incident began just after 3:15 a.m. on November 20th, when flames broke out in one of the upper units of a 2-story apartment complex in the village of Clifton, located on the outskirts of the city of Nottingham. Emergency responders were immediately called and rushed to the scene. It took roughly an hour to fully extinguish the blaze, during which time surrounding homes were evacuated and 3 people were carried out from within the burning apartment. They were later identified as 28-year-old mother Fatoumata Haidara and her 2 daughters, 3-year-old Fatima and 1-year-old Naima. Though paramedics did their best to administer life-saving care to the 3 victims, sadly, shortly after their arrival at the hospital, Fatima and Naima were pronounced dead. Fatoumata was placed on life support and managed to hang on for a while, but tragically, after 2 days, she also passed away. All 3 family members reportedly died of smoke inhalation. After conducting an investigation at the scene of the fire, authorities were allegedly quickly able to conclude that the incident was no accident. They now say that the case was an arson, and have accused a 31-year-old man named Jamie Barrow of starting the blaze. Barrow was reportedly arrested later that same day and has now been charged with 3 counts of murder. Despite the charges, at the time of this recording, little information has been released about the circumstances that led up to the fatal arson. Authorities have not revealed what evidence they have against Barrow, nor have they speculated as to an alleged motive. Multiple reports have stated, though, that Barrow apparently lives in the same apartment complex as the victims. While news of the horrific incident has come as a major blow to the local community, many say their thoughts are now with 40-year-old Abu Bakr Drama, who is Fatoumata's husband and the father of the two girls. At the time of the incident, he was reportedly away in the US on business, though immediately rushed home after being given the devastating news. In a couple of brief statements this week, the 40-year-old said that he is still coming to terms with the horrifying magnitude of what has happened. He has also released tributes to his wife and daughters, remarking on the joy that each of them brought to his life. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a minute to thank our amazing supporters over on Patreon. As many of you are aware, our situation on YouTube always seems to be a bit uncertain, but our patrons help to ensure that we can continue to make content like this long term without having to worry as much about what surprises might be thrown our way. Plus, patrons also get access to 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. If you'd like to help support the channel directly, head over to patreon.com/crimezone to join. You can also find that link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care.